What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you live Monday, September 9th, 2024, from a crispy Long Beach, California. 94 degrees, last day of a pretty wild heat wave here in Southern California, but the show must go on. There's still plenty of Duck football to talk about, and we're sure glad to have you here on our Oregon Football Monday mailbag. And joining me, as always, is ScoopDuck's Travis Rooke-Ley. Travis, how we doing, man? Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Not quite 94 up here. A little cool 75 in Portland, but ready to talk some ball.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great pod, as always. I'm also a little bit more amped up today. I got a little coffee here to get me through the pod, and it is also game one for my Niners, San Francisco 49ers, going against the New York Jets on week 1 Monday Night Football. We'll also add that I am in an absolute shootout with one of my best buddies in our fantasy league. So we'll see what's going on. I have Debo, I have the Niners D, and I have Breece Hall, and then he has Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey. So I'm a little bit worried about the McCaffrey play, but I think Ayuk might be a bit rusty because he spent so much time off. But we don't need to do too much NFL talk. I don't know how you felt about the opening weekend, Travis.
Oh, I'm Niners hard. That's my dad's team since he was little. But I also, I think I'm up 1 point, and I have Breece Hall, and my opponent has Garrett Wilson. So it's going to be I'm basically just rooting for 1 point for Breece Hall, 0 for Wilson. Niner win, and we're set.
There you go. Okay, so we're both on the Breece Hall train tonight, but not too hard because we want to make sure that the Niners come away with a win. So the Ducks, they came away with a win over the weekend, 37-34 over Boise State. And another game that, I think it was super entertaining, but from an Oregon perspective, it certainly felt like it left a lot to be desired, Travis, as there was a lot of sloppy play out there, a lot of penalties. Offensive line had its challenges. Ashton Genty had himself a day against what was supposed to be, and I still think can be, a really good defense. So there's a lot of thoughts that are kind of circulating around the brain right now. And we got some mailbag questions from Twitter, from our ScoopDuck subscribers. So Travis put those together for us as we kind of got organized for today's episode. But if you're here on the live stream, go ahead and let us know how you're feeling about that Boise State win, and then how you're feeling about the Ducks as they prepare for a week 3 rivalry matchup with the Oregon State Beavers out there in Corvallis. And just wanted to say off the top right quick, we're running a little promo over on the site. Over on ScoopDuck.com, you can use the code GODUCKS for 50% off an annual ScoopDuck membership to get the very best in Oregon football and recruiting, and some lively message boards. I think that's a good way to describe it, Travis. You've got your doom and gloom, you've got your, hey, it's going to be all right, and we try to find a balance somewhere in between. But with all that being said, man, let's open up that bag of mail and see what the Duck fans are thinking.
Yeah, let's do it. It was definitely one of those games where I think that it was funny leaving the stadium. The degenerates of us, myself included, like obviously leave that game stressed out of our minds and just happy it's over. But what's crazy about the game, it was a great game if you weren't living and dying with every play. So I don't know, that was as wild swings, momentum changes as I can remember. But as you said, given the kind of temperature of the Duck fan base now, we kind of grouped the questions into 3 different categories. A lot of the questions we got were offensive line related, not to the surprise of nobody. There were definitely some different hits of different elements that I kind of deemed cultural, and then just kind of some general questions. So we're going to start by just talking about some of those cultural type questions that I noticed in the chat. Some different things being discussed in there, I think, that we can talk about. To start, some of the things I heard on there: why is everything Lanning preaches not showing up in the team's attitude and how they play? Too many transfers, no vocal senior leadership. There just seems to be a disconnect. Another one: how much of the lack of enthusiasm, cohesiveness, and execution stems from the number of transfers we've taken? A little more bluntly, what the heck is going on? How is there such a gap in talent on paper versus product and performance, and then kind of a couple questions about like vocal leadership. So I don't know, culturally, let's just start there. What are your thoughts?
The first one that came to my mind, Travis, was almost immediately after the game. I was tuned in to Lanning's press conference in the post game, and he sat down, about to do his thing. And Justin wrote about this, but it's something that I think bears repeating, or just some comments here. So he sat down, and then he got up and he said, "Hey, I just need a second, sorry." And he had to close the door on his right-hand side, which is not usually where he enters from. He usually enters from the left. And I think he was talking about how the guys are excited. And I didn't think much of it at first, but it kind of got into a point that Justin and I were talking about on yesterday's pod. Like, these guys it's so loud because they're celebrating. Like, you can celebrate a win. That, like, there is nothing wrong with that. But let's just not forget that there are expectations on this team that they just haven't met. They were darn near 20-point favorites coming into that game against Boise State, and you barely squeaked by the skin of your teeth. 3 points thanks to a game-winning field goal from Atticus Sappington, and they're, I guess, I mean, they're not usually that loud. Like, that's never happened to my knowledge, or maybe one or two other times. So I hate to rag on the guys or say anything like that for celebrating, because I'm all for it, but it's pretty clear that this team is playing well below the standard right now, and for them to be celebrating like that, I think was something that left me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. None of us are in that locker room. None of us are on the sidelines. I think that some of the stuff on here, I think, is really unfair, and I don't really think that there's any evidence to think that. I mean, lack of enthusiasm. I don't know that that's the root of anything that's happened the first 2 games of the season. Gap in performance, I get that. I trying to think of the best way to put it. I think that the sloppiness is totally fair, 100%. I think that the lack of execution, 100%. Whether we want to deem that to be like a cultural thing or not, I think is up for debate. I mean, I think that clearly the coaching staff needs to do a better job. I'm sure they know that. And the guys need to do a better job. I'm sure they know that. I just don't know that. I know that fans want to place these 2 performances on lack of preparation, culture not being as good as we think. Like, I'm just not ready to go quite there yet, personally. I do think it comes down to, I mean, I just go through drive after drive in these games, and every drive comes back to a guy missing an assignment or a sloppy penalty. And right now, the problem is, like, we're just not playing well enough to have a margin for error. And we've had that margin for error many of the years that I've been following Oregon football because of how good our offense has been executing. So I think that to get to the larger point of, like, why is our talent not matching our performance? Like, for me, I don't want to touch on the cultural piece, the pieces of how well we're connected, or are we not connected, or guys playing for each other. Like, none of us can honestly answer that. And I think speculating just ends up kind of hurting the entire notion of the argument. But I think that what we can talk about is guys are sloppy, 100%. They're not executing at the level that's expected of any of us. And I think that's ultimately what hurt us the first couple games.
Sure. I think you make a good point about just none of us know for sure what's going on in that locker room unless we're the players or the coaches. And I don't say that as like a cop out, but I think that the bigger point that we're kind of driving at with the sloppy play is it's just undisciplined football. And we've seen that in the past, but not so much from the Ducks since Lanning took over. If anything else, I think that's kind of become a given that they're locked in, that they're crisp, that they're in the right place at the right time. They're not missing a whole bunch of tackles. They're checking off all the fundamentals, but that's clearly not what we're seeing right now, because we're seeing the Ducks shoot themselves in the foot with an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, or snapping the ball before the play is ready to go. just so many things that are probably small in the moment, but to your point, you don't have the lead. Like you have not had a big lead to play with, so you don't have that margin for error. And they're at a point now where I think there's got to be some kind of a balance we can strike here, Travis, right? Between, and I feel like we've said this before. I'm trying to think about when we talked about this last, but like some kind of a balance between the sky is falling and this is nowhere near the team that we thought they were going to be versus, okay, this is week 2 of the season. There's still a long ways to go. You still have three-ish weeks, about a month until Ohio State comes to town. And that's the game that everyone has circled. But if you're Oregon, you also have to stay present in the moment, and you can't let that Ohio State game be on your mind right now because you have 2 other games that you have to play before that, and then you also have to stay locked in during that bye week. We can't gloss over that. I think that is super important. Like that bye week could be exactly what the Ducks need, and we didn't really think that going into the year.
Yeah, I think that the way I've kind of adjusted myself to think about is we basically have this lead up of Oregon State by UCLA, Michigan State that leads you up until that Ohio State game. So you basically have 4 weeks to, I mean, those 3 teams are, I don't know exactly how they add up to Boise and how they would stack up. I don't think any of them are better. I think they're probably similar. I think you could make the argument Boise's probably a little bit better, but a couple of those are on the road. Long story short, if we play the way that we're playing right now, those are competitive games, all of them. And they probably weren't at the start of the year in our minds. But you have 4 weeks to build that cohesiveness, to get used to the whatever Dylan Gabriel needs. I think that's certainly been proven to be different than Bo Nix. And you have time to get some guys back on the O-line that I know the coaches are depending on. So I think I was definitely one of the people at the start of the year that talked about like these 5 weeks as almost like scrimmages to get younger guys involved. It's not that. And that's just the reality of the situation. Like we haven't had any time to play like basically our second string guys, let alone third and fourth string guys. If you had told me we weren't going to see Dante Moore after 2 games, I would have think he had a season-ending injury. So I think that has changed, but I think at the same time, even leading up to Ohio State, with the 12-team playoff, I don't say this lightly, as much as I want to be at our 100% full strength, operating on perfect cylinders, whatever, against Ohio State, like that game just isn't a must win. And it's not where you have to be at your best. We need to be playing our best going into November, in my mind. That's when the season really like turns on and you have some games on the road where like you need to be humming. So I'm viewing this as like a lead up to Ohio State, get through the next few weeks, hopefully improve. I think we saw in the second half this week, we'll get to it with the O-line, like we saw some good signs. I just think it's not going to be just like a well-oiled machine to start off the year that we've seen the last few years.
And it's a good point it's worth mentioning the 12-team playoff, because that Ohio State game, as much anticipation, as much hype and excitement as there is around that game, it's not going to make or break your season, because even though it feels like Oregon doesn't have a big margin for error right now because of the sloppy play, you do in reality have a margin for error because of the expanded playoff. Granted, the more that you lean into that margin for error, or the more that you need that cushion, if you will, Travis, you're going to be making things harder for yourself come the postseason, right? Just with the way that the seeding works and everything. But I like that you mentioned that, because I think it puts things into a good perspective here as we kind of unpack this Boise State win and where the Ducks are at. I definitely want to talk some O-line, but before we get to that, there's kind of one more broader, I don't know if culture is the right way, but to put it in there, but it was, I think, talked about a little bit in your section here on the doc that we're using. I'm not so much questioning the culture of the team. What I said with Justin was that the culture of the team is being tested right now, which I think is pretty fair to say. given where the expectations were at and where the results have been so far. And I want to talk about the transfers because I am not saying, let me be very clear, I am not saying that Oregon is in a Colorado situation where you're almost entirely reliant on transfers to field the team and that's where you're trying to make up for this talent gap. The Ducks aren't in that spot. They recruit the high school ranks well. They recruit the transfer portal rankings very well also. But they did like really attack the transfer portal a lot harder than I expected. I don't know if you expected them to go that hard, Travis, but that's the reality of the situation is that they did bring in a lot of transfers. And I think that lends itself to maybe somewhat of a grace period, right? With the gelling and the cohesion and everybody being on the same page, the communication, the signals, whatever it is, playing off of each other. And we're seeing some new guys make an early impact, like Brandon Johnson, I think has probably been the best transfer so far, at least defensively. He's up there. Derek Harmon's doing well. Jabbar Muhammad's doing well. So I just wonder how the transfer portal plays into it now as far as Oregon is concerned, because you have a lot of guys that came back, particularly on offense, but we're seeing the defense also have some holes that they're plugging and some new faces making plays. And I mean, the offense, I guess we can't gloss over that because Dylan Gabriel is running the show and he's a transfer. So I don't know. I'm not trying to be overly critical or anything, but I just think it's worth a discussion here.
Yeah. And I just keep coming back to, I mean, I just think that me and you and every national guy out there just expected to kind of turn over the keys and not miss a beat. And it's clear that hasn't been the case. I think about in a 12-team playoff era when you need to be playing your best football, and like that's in us somewhere. There's too many proven guys to not have that. And what this gives you the ability to do is be at your best in November and still be able to make a run. I mean, I think about the 2015 season when Vernon Adams went down. That team was playing a top 5 team. We were a top 5 team in the country by the end of the year, but we had 3 losses. Nowadays, you start humming like that and you have a shot. So to me, I'm just trying to look at it as like a progression down the line a little bit. And at the same time, I think about I had a friend's dad who was at the Oregon Club lunch today, and some of the coaches stopped by there. And one of the guys was telling me about what Junior Adams said, which is like the value of being in close games and what that does later on in the year. I think I was right with everyone sweating that one out, but I think if you look about it after, there is a world in which we look back at that game and being in competitive games in the fourth quarter early in the year. And maybe culturally that helps. Heck, we've been in it. We've been down, whether you're down 7 at Wisconsin in late November playing for a playoff berth. We've been here. That was the difference last year. We weren't in those games at all. And you could see that Husky game came around, Pac-12 title game, and we were tight, like really tight. And it took us a while. So, I don't know. I'm just trying to think about this stuff positively. I can get down the rabbit hole like everyone else when I start thinking negative. So I think there is a world in which these games come back to be benefits for us down the line.
Got to go game by game. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do is analyze things as they happen, but also keep the big picture in mind, the games that they're going to have to play, the road trips they're going to have to take, and looking through all of that with the lens of the expectations that this team had before the season, because it wasn't just us in the Oregon market, Travis. National people were hyping them up too. And it seems like they still have all those pieces in place to be a really, really good team. So we'll see what they do this week when they face Oregon State. Want to talk about some O-line, maybe? Going on to that?
Let's do it. I don't know. I feel like the questions are all over the board. I feel like we might as well just chat a little generally about it. I'm kind of twofold here. I think on one hand, we're definitely missing 2 of what I would say are our top 6 O-linemen. So I think that's a fair thing to think about when we're talking about the performance. On the other hand, Boise lost 2 starters Their starting center wasn't playing, and they lost one of their starting guards in the first 2 minutes of that game. And they protected a lot better than we were, and they ran the ball a lot better than we were. So I don't think it's fair to use the injuries to Dave Iuli and Bedford as a cop-out. I think at the same time, it's just we can't get 5 to play well, play to play. When I was going through the replay, I wrote down 15 different plays where we either popped a run and somebody held, or 4 guys blocked well and 1 guy missed his block. We just can't get there right now. I think the second half was better. I think moving Poncho back to center and Strother at guard. We ran the ball really well in the second half. Our drives were just killed by, honestly, backside holds a couple times, just silly, once again, sloppiness. But I think for the most part, in terms of assignment to assignment and actually running the ball with efficiency, I hope the second half is a good indication moving forward.
And that's really where the struggles have, I think, originated, Travis, is the run game. Oregon has, as long as I've been following them, been a run first team. So if you establish the run, if you can run the ball consistently, that's going to open up the rest of the offense. That's football 101. I'm not preaching some crazy stuff here to anybody. And they just haven't had a consistent run game. And I think their longest run of the day was 12 yards against Boise. That is just not the Oregon team that we have come to know. And even though the running game has been pretty rocky, Jordan James has looked really good. You could tell. I was watching that absolute travesty of a live stream on Peacock, and I could see Jordan James, huffing and puffing. I don't know if his arm was hurt or something, but that dude was battling down the stretch in that game. And they leaned on him to pick up some pretty crucial yards to ultimately get close enough to kick that game-winning field goal. So even though the run game has been underwhelming, I think Jordan James is still going to be a very key component of this offense. And I think if they didn't end up going for that field goal, that he probably would have found the end zone. I know there's a question here from Eric about when's the last time we went 2 games without a rushing touchdown. But really, with the offensive line, I think one of the most obvious solutions here is move Poncho to center and keep him there. I don't know if Oregon has the luxury of being able to rotate a lot of guys right now, because you're seeing a clear drop off in the on-field product. And I can understand wanting to develop depth and grow depth and have your rotation, but it seems pretty clear, even through just 2 games, Travis, that Poncho at center gives this offense their best shot. And if that means that you bring in Strother and maybe you move over Marcus Harper, then maybe that's just something you have to do right now. But we are all asking that question: what on earth is this offensive line going to look like when Matthew Bedford comes back? Because we really haven't seen it.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with that lineup, and I think Poncho at center is ultimately going to be where we're at. I think at the same, no one's out here screaming that, Charlie Pickard is playing amazing, but I think to point all the issues to him, and just act like Poncho moving back to center is going to fix everything, I think is limiting the fact that Poncho was not playing well at guard. Harper had a rough game. He just missed a lot. And on some big plays too. So I think that ultimately my prediction of what's going to happen is Poncho's going to move back to center. We're going to look a lot better as the season goes, and guys are going to blame all these 2 games on Charlie Pickard. And I just don't think that's a fair characterization to him, given that this unit has just not looked well in general. And you're totally right about the run game. I think at the same time, there were stretches of that game where we couldn't drop back. There was a 4-play series in the third quarter where we just handed the ball off 4 times, because I'm guessing, I don't know what else of an explanation it could have been, that we were afraid to drop back on our own 10 because we're going to get sacked in the end zone. I haven't seen that since the Mario Anthony Brown days. Just the inconsistency, running, passing, it just feels like we're just a click off. And I think that what I've realized the last two games is that Bo and JPJ were really good. They were really good physically, but they were also really good mentally. And they had that offense, that offensive line, their calls dialed. I mean, we did not have free rushers last year. And if we did, Bo was like hot route, ball out. Versus this year, I mean, we've had more free runners at Gabriel than I can ever remember. And like that comes down. That's like center communication, Gabriel. It's just the operation is off.
And it felt on Saturday, I don't even know if this is an accurate way of putting it, but because it was a down day for Oregon on the ground, right? Let's just call it what it is. 110 rushing yards is not the standard on 35 carries with a long 12 yards. It felt like the special teams touchdowns from Tez and Noah kind of were a little bit of the rushing offense, because if you take those two touchdowns out of the game, this Oregon offense looks even worse, which is tough. I mean, special teams aren't technically offense, but when you're putting points on the board, I think that's a fair way to kind of customize it here, or group it, if you will. And the other point too that you mentioned was just how comfortable Bo and Jackson were getting to play together as long as they did. And that's not the situation that Oregon finds themselves in. Like, I don't want to say that Dylan Gabriel doesn't trust the offensive line, because I don't think that's true. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but because they've only played together so much, like, he's just getting the feel for these guys as he goes. And I think that as the season goes, he will get more comfortable in the pocket. He'll be more confident maybe in that offensive line, and he'll have a better awareness, because he said it himself after that game, Travis, that some of those sacks were straight up just on him. So that's where I think another component of this, okay, the expectations aren't there, but maybe they're not there yet because it's still 2 weeks, is appropriate to kind of lean on.
Yeah, it's just been such an interesting, I mean, these two games were so different in terms of our offensive performance. You know, I remember looking up near the end of the third quarter of this game, and we didn't have 10 first down yet. You know, against Idaho, our problem wasn't moving the ball. Our problem was we couldn't make an explosive play. We were moving every drive, first downs, couldn't finish. This game, every TD we had, or every long drive, seemed to be just on a big pop play. Which is awesome. I love that. But we're just like caught in the middle. We couldn't sustain anything. Our drives were just so boom or bust, except for that last one. So I don't know. There are plays to be made down the field. Guys are open. Gabriel hit some of them. I think that as he gets more comfortable, we'll hit more of them. I mean, James's numbers specifically were good in the run game. He was efficient. Mm-hmm. And he looked good out there, as you said. I just keep coming back to everything. Just feels between Stein, between Gabriel, between the O-line, just feels a tick off. Every drive we did not score on, we either had a penalty to set us behind the chains, a tackle for loss on a missed block, something to set us back. We're just not playing at the level right now where we're overcoming stuff like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic. We're either going to start playing at that level where we can make up for some mistakes, or we're going to stop making the mistakes. Probably a little bit of both. I just can't see this. We're too good to keep playing like this.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. That's why everybody's just baffled right now. You're seeing the videos come out. Are like, is it time to get nervous, or is Oregon good? Like, people are asking that question now because of what we've seen through 2 weeks. But I think that there still is obviously a whole lot of season left, and there's time to improve and go through some of these growing pains. Before we get to the next portion of the show, Travis, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors here on the Duck Dish podcast, and that is Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy, Ruben, and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Sure, glad to have you guys along on today's episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast. Max Torres, Travis Rooke-Ley from ScoopDuck on 3 here talking some Boise State win for the Ducks and kind of where this team is at moving forward. Travis, the last little subsection that we had on today's podcast for the mailbag was just some general stuff like big season, big picture thoughts about the guys in green and yellow. So how about we turn the page to that?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about this last question here, like viewing that game as a net positive or net negative. I do think it's important when I think about that to just like make this point, which is, I mentioned at the top, that game was so crazy when it comes to momentum. And I just think about like 2 points in that game. We were up 14-10 in the second quarter with about 5 minutes left at midfield. We've dominated the middle eight the last 2 years. I just think about like if we stay ahead of the chains there and go up 21-10 at half, what that game looks like. Even more so, I think about in the fourth quarter, we get a stop. We've been dominating the entire half on defense. And Herbert fumbles. We go in and score there. We're up 2 scores. In my mind, that's probably like a 41-20 final, given the way we were playing defense. So the elements are there of the team we've seen the last 2 years. And we saw against Idaho, that score was not reflective of the way that game was played either. So it's really small stuff. I keep coming back to, and it's why I answered this question was I think that game can be a net positive. Like these are small things that we've done well in the past. Our roster's good. Our coaches haven't changed. I just got to think that stuff gets fixed.
And I find myself also on the side of that Boise State win being a net positive, even though it looked sloppy. I mean, I even wrote in my takeaway story, was that a bounce back game for Dylan Gabriel? And I think it was, sacks aside, because you saw him step up in the pocket and take some of those deep shots down the field. And that's something that I wanted to see him do from game 1 to game 2. And I also put out a tweet yesterday just asking people to describe the Oregon game in one word. And I think I said chaotic, but some people were saying resilient. Some people were saying won. Someone else said like 2-0. So I think the big part that I want to focus on was late in that game when Gabriel popped it out to Patrick Herbert, Justin Herbert. I was watching the Chargers this morning. He fired it to Patrick Herbert, and the ball popped out on just a great play. You got to tip your cap for Boise. And then there was the early snap and the fumble that resulted after that. A lot of teams could have just been like, man, we're screwed. It's just not our day today. But they had those huge special teams touchdowns. And I think that, I don't know, for as wacky of a game as it was, Travis, like we've been talking about how underwhelming Oregon's special teams game has been for the last couple of years. And then when Tez housed that punt, I was thinking like, wow, is that really the first time since Ugo Amadi returned one against UCLA in 2018 that the Ducks have done that? And then no, Whittington, as hard as he might have tried to not have that be a touchdown, still don't understand why players want to drop the ball, but I'm not a high-level athlete. Jalen Lamar was there to save the day. Like those 2 big plays and all the effort that you saw on those blocks from Devin Jackson, Dalen Austin, Jalen Lamar, Bryce Betcher, like all of those, like I think that is a foreshadowing of what's to come. The fact that has been something they have been really struggling with and then got better at clearly this offseason. We know that they at least improved in that regard. I think that I'm going to kind of hang my hat on that being one of many things that I think gives me confidence that this team is still trending in the right direction.
And it's like special teams are like the perfect illustration of this team right now because they win us that game. But at the same time, we had all the momentum in the world and we kicked the ball out of bounds. That hurts us. Sappington misses a PAT to put us up 1. That hurts us. Tez, bless his heart, on that long punt that they downed at the 4, could have picked up the ball at the 10 and ran, but we get it at the 4. We're pinned back. We don't score. We're offsides on another kickoff. Like, it's almost comical. I just could not, going through it, I didn't realize like every offense, defense, special teams are doing all these amazing, amazing things. The defense is like dialed all half, and then Ginty 70 yards doesn't get touched. It's just been a weird 2 games. But as you said, I feel like there's just enough of the pops, enough of the stuff that we expected from this team. You know, the Beavers, the matchup is great for us. Just to look ahead real quick. I mean, they ran for 350 yards last week. They could not throw the ball. Their best receiver, let's just say I like our DBs against their receivers. I think we're going to be able to stack the box. I think our defensive line should have success. You got to get to that bye week. You got to make it through this week, hopefully look better. You get to that bye. I know that's been the target for Bedford and Iuli. I don't know how much that's changed. Lanning's obviously tight-lipped, but I know the goal all along has been to get 3-0, get to that bye week, give them another week, and so hopefully slowly introduce them with UCLA and Michigan State to where you have your unit against Ohio State. So hopefully that's still the case. Get through this week, and it might not be pretty, but 3-0 is 3-0.
I was shocked that Oregon State blanked San Diego State. I think that San Diego State started a true freshman quarterback, the kid that used to be committed to Colorado, if I'm remembering that right. Yep. But that's still a road game for Oregon State, and it's been hotter than hell out here in SoCal this weekend. So I think that you got to give them some credit there. I mean, San Diego State's not exactly a powerhouse team, but a road win's a road win, especially with everything that went on with realignment and the portal and how that negatively affected the Beavers. But I think this game shapes up well for Oregon, obviously just on paper for some of those reasons that you mentioned. We know that they have the better roster, but also I think it'll be a good test early on, even though it's only a 40-minute drive over to Corvallis. It's still a road trip. I think that Lanning has given me more confidence in Oregon showing up from week to week, even if it's on the road, than I felt during the Cristobal era. But even so, that this is a good test for them. Like, they can't, much like we kind of got, or at least I was thinking like, wow, this is a team that really read too much of their press clippings after that Idaho win. I think that this is a perfect opportunity to lock in. You said it yourself before we recorded that you haven't been to a hot game in Corvallis because we're used to having that one after Thanksgiving, right? So it's a good challenge for the Ducks to have. A rivalry game, you can never overlook that because you're not going to be able to live that one down. You got to go the rest of the year until you play them again. And it's an opportunity to get up for a road game. And this is going to be an earlier game with the Ducks. I think it's 12:30 kick out there in Corvallis, but there's going to be some challenges, even though it seems like a team that Oregon really outmatches on paper, but we've thought that in the past, and look how the season's gone. So I think it'll be one that Lanning has them ready for, and it's another opportunity. I said it last week, another opportunity for that veteran leadership to really take charge, grab somebody by the face mask, and just get these guys locked in.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of tie a bow on that, I think that I never played to the level of these athletes, but most high level athletes love a raucous road environment. That can sometimes like lock you in a little bit. So something I'm really thinking about this week is and I'm hopeful about is those Beaver fans are going to be up. They want nothing more after all the conference stuff than to beat us. This is their Super Bowl. And I'm hoping, veteran squad like us, maybe that's what it's going to take is going on the road. Probably going to be a little bit of a chippy game, especially early. Maybe that's the type of thing that locks guys in a little bit and can bring the team, to playing at the level that they need to. It's easy sometimes to be, hey, we're at home. We're going to handle these guys. Read your press clippings, like you mentioned, 20-point favorites. I'm hoping a road environment may bring out a little bit different squad when it comes to being locked in, execution, sloppiness, stuff like that.
No doubt about it. We'll see. Oregon versus Oregon State Saturday afternoon out there in Corvallis. We'll hear from Oregon head coach Dan Lanning later on tonight, 6:45 p.m. Lanning is scheduled to speak with reporters in Eugene. Lanning loves that late night press conference. Not sure why, but hey, that's what it is. I would love if he spoke earlier in the day, but that's okay. I'm just doing my job. We'll see what updates come from that, and we'll make sure that that's updated with you guys over on ScoopDuck. So make sure you guys go check us out there. And then Travis and I are hoping to, or planning at least, on doing these every Monday. So we'll have the game breakdown from one of Justin or myself, both of us probably, on Saturdays or Sundays. And then Travis and I will kind of take a temp check, if you will, pulse check of the fan base on Monday following that. And we got an awesome turnout here in the live stream today, almost 800 people. So really appreciate you guys tuning in and showing out, showing some love in the chat. If you want to find more of Travis, you can follow him on Twitter/X at Travis Rooke-Ley. You can find me on any social media platform at Torres Sports. Want to encourage you to check out my Instagram because I've been popping off a little bit over there lately with a lot of really awesome photos from the Ducks' first 2 games. And make sure you sub to the channel at ScoopDuck on 3 here on YouTube. Like and comment, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on the live streams, and then come see us at ScoopDuck.com for the very best in Oregon football and recruiting. But until next time, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.